alternate research projects up there. One would focus specifically on social media dissemination, that push versus pull information delivery we talked about. Does that vary across demographics? Unknown. This whole Senior Center, Safe Center initiative that's been developed both in Alabama and Florida, that's something that's pre-existing. We could look at that right now, pre-existing test bed that would allow us to look at the factors that led to adoption of that particular policy and whether or not they're actually being used during emergencies. We came across that interesting idea of homeless people being unfettered and being hooked in to social networks. Kind of an interesting area. Could we learn something there? We also talked about, and this is related to one of our big projects, recovery. Is quick recovery necessarily good recovery? We've heard a couple different people from local environment here telling us about Joplin being associated with very quick recovery, where they relaxed building codes, whereas other townships and communities, such as Tuscaloosa, have looked at a longer-term approach where they're doing things right. How do these governing bodies come to develop these different paths of recovery? What were the factors associated with that adoption? And has recovery been successful? These are all empirical questions we could ask. Last but not least, and this is something that I've heard from other folks as well, exploring mortality and injury prevalence for people with different types of disabilities. So this is kind of a tweak on just getting better data. Here we would want more specific data. We want to drill down from mortality, injury prevalence, and look at, is it different for these vulnerable parts of the population? So, questions? Not going to say you like it? Come on.
Thank you. Those are very interesting. And the first one, I had a question, though, about how you can tell in the recovery process what part of that was due to the pre-event planning and what part was, how do you find such comparable types of damage between two different sets of towns that you know you can attribute it to the pre-event planning?
That's a great point, and that leads us back to that concept that correlation does not equate
right.
Causation.
Exactly.
We were thinking about this, and with 2,000 communities out there for that particular type, I mean, obviously we would have to cast a wide net. We would have to do some serious matching in terms of environment, hazard type, level of hazard. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's a sticky issue. I agree.
It's all the communities that have been impacted by tornadoes. And those that were impacted by tornadoes, how many of them were storm-ready communities? How many of those were not storm-ready communities? And it may not, it could, assessing the whole response, how many people died. And I think it would be interesting to find out, are communities that are storm-ready better prepared to facilitate a recovery process? Because of the work that they had to do to become certified storm ready. And as well as Project Impact and other efforts that may be going on across the country.
I really appreciated the project on storm shelters and safe room at low cost, and I was wondering if you thought about a project in which there would be an open competition amongst university, undergraduate, and graduate students to create a low-cost project, say less than $1,000 total cost, that could be open, competed, and then they all come together in the wind tunnel and see what happens to them with crash dummies or something inside. To like think outside the box of getting lower cost things out there that could be purchased at Home Depot and maybe do it yourself storm shelter reinforcement at a very low cost.
Yeah, I could definitely see that as an option. I mean, there are different design competitions now. We would just be giving them a direction to go in.
Kind of equivalent.
See, my idea was a suit of, gosh, what is it, the airbags that people could wear for $5 and kind of bounce around. But, you know, don't think it's going to happen, but, you know, we'll leave that to the engineers and designers. Yeah, great idea. Thank you.
Last group, red. Who's red? Jeff.
They don't fall asleep.
Yeah, really. It's been a long. So it's we're done at 12. Okay, see. Yeah, I'm actually surprised there's anybody left in the room. Well, first of all, like everyone else, I want to say my group was a real pain in the butt, and you know, I don't think we'll see you guys again for a couple of years. So it was nice seeing you. Actually, I think Dan's the only one's left. Everyone else in our group is already gone. So the other thing I just point out is I think there's already been about 6 talks, and pretty much every one of them included some economics. So we already have identified a number of economic aspects in those talks. So I'm going to go through this hopefully fairly quickly if I can find the right button. Okay. So we basically came up with 3 projects, and there was 3 economists in the room. So if there's any semblance to pet rocks, that's just coincidence. No, instead of going through this. The first one, investigate if and how emergency managers, schools, utilities, business, medias, et cetera, use the longer term outlooks like the hazardous weather outlook, the severe outlook. There's a lot of emphasis on this very short term, the warning watch, you know, 15-minute. I think it'd be interesting to look at the economic side of, not just the economic side, but kind of the behavioral side of these. What's the impact of 2, 3, 4-day warnings, and how are people using those, and not just the end users, but all the various intermediate actors. Again, like others, after seeing Yvette's talk, okay, we're now saying this is $750 per project per year per person so we're up to about 10 million. But that does actually, we want to emphasize it's, as social scientists, we always feel apologetic when we come up and say what we think a project's going to cost, and we always underestimate that. And I think Linda said that too. So I think any of these, if we realistically double these and double the number of projects, because very rarely, if ever, do we get more than one project. Very rarely is there ever a verification or validation. So usually we're relying on one project. So we even at least try to say maybe 2 projects for some of these. Time to completion on something like this. Again, these are all not just economists working, but we do need to work to some extent with the other partners. 2 years. Time to implementation. We kind of went around on this, what that meant. Like once the study, like an economic study is done, the results are available for use. So how do you implement an economic study? I was like, okay, you read it, you give it to the policymakers. The implementation part may be on some of these. It takes longer to implement the study that we're doing an economic assessment of. So that wasn't really clear. Implementation barriers. For any of these, I think we kind of said, you know, human resources, labor relations. Again, that's not really affecting the economic study as much as perhaps the program that is being talked about. So I'm going to skip through some of these. The second one, I think this again is potentially a program justification use, but basically value of improved tornado forecast and warning. Again, multi-year, multi-million-dollar projects may take. Any of these are going to take about 2 to 3 years. Again, these can be scoped down. You know, I hate to say in consulting, I could crank out a study in 3 months, but it looked like it was used as a cookie cutter. So it depends on what you have funding for, what you want, what you're going to use it for at the end of the day. The other thing, most information we're putting in here, these look very much like this is how we're going to write our RFP because this is kind of how NOAA wants this. I think these can be useful for that. But if we're talking about the broader underlying research questions, maybe of interest to, say, the more primary, like NSF type things, a lot of this, you know, the cost of the project is not necessarily of interest to NSF at this point. Again, in terms of a valuation study, you know, 1 to 2 million, again, multiple projects for validation, verification, and because asking different researchers are going to use different methods So it's not just the same, different people using the same methods again and again. The third project we're talking about, this is evaluating the visual and textual tornado, basically kind of the content of the products, services, delivery methods, using some other tools. This is not necessarily an evaluation study, but using lab methods and, say, lab methods, experimental economics does a lot of work in terms of decision making that really doesn't generate dollar values, but really is using our tools and methods and theories for looking at decision making, communication, use of information. Again, we tacked on 1 to 3 million without really having a good feeling. Maybe the low, medium, high would be a better way of doing this. And months to 2 years to implement, a couple years to get the study done. So I'm blazed through this very quickly. We did have, while Jamie and I were sitting there discussing politics and stuff like that, Dan actually sat and typed a, here's a paragraph that could be attached to an RFP for one of the projects. And if needed, Jamie and I could do those for the other projects as well. So Dan actually did what he was asked to do, and Jamie and I were having a good time talking. So I only see Jamie at these meetings. So.
Any comments or questions?
And I need to check out, so
Yeah.
we'll see.
Yeah. Okay. Then I think we're ready to close. I want to thank you all. I mean, from looking at this morning, I saw some common threads that showed up in a few of the groups from projects, which will. I won't claim that Mike and my's job for the next is going to be painless, but it's probably about as least painful as it could possibly be. And I really thank you all for helping in this process. And hopefully, besides the direct large impacts that we can get out of this, there's been some individual collaborations that have been proposed that will be useful to you personally down the road. I really want to give a big thank to Bill Murray. And his staff, but that when Mike and I and Bill were approached about this, I know that one of the scariest parts. This has not been the least painful process of getting to this meeting for the three of us, but that Bill has certainly taken a huge burden off of Mike and I in terms of the logistics and all that we didn't even think about these kinds of issues, and made this just a whole lot easier for us. And certainly he's been an outstanding host and a great place to have the meeting. And Mike, we've got a lot more work still to do, but it's been a joy working with you so far. Do we have any closing comments? Yeah, make sure we have this, because we're supposed to be recording this for the transcript so that you and I can have an easier job later.
One of the things I want to do is I want to thank all of you who came. I know everybody's got busy schedules. You're the best people that we could identify in the entire country to participate in this workshop. And since I'm a professor, I'm acutely aware of all the kinds of rearranging class schedules and things like that professors had to do. Some people were grading papers and rearranged exam schedules and presentation schedules. So we really appreciate everything, all the trouble that everybody took to attend these meetings.
The summer community meeting in Norman, Betsy's putting that together, AMS Summer Community Meeting, August the 13th through the 16th in Norman. Contact her for more information or see the AMS website. Have a safe trip home, and we'll be in contact with you to get more information if we need it down the road.
Add something, Harold?
Yeah.
I also want to really thank Harold and Mike for making this happen. Given the task that they were given, how late they were given this, and the pressure they were under to make this happen, it's amazing that this came off. And thank Harold and Mike for that. Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you.